For a long time now, companies and organizations of all sizes have been capturing data through their ERP applications, perhaps homegrown systems, um, and one of the largest data repositories out there is actually Microsoft Excel. There's a lot of data in spreadsheets, and for all of this data, there's more and more pressure on the enterprise and on an organization to make this data available, whether that be to share across the supply chain with customers or suppliers, and even internally to build composite applications for the field. So the purpose of this demonstration is to show how OpsGen can be used to take a spreadsheet, import that spreadsheet, and turn it into a fully stood up API on Microsoft Azure. The first step in this process is we're going to create an API inside the OpsGen user interface, and we're going to call this Company Sales API. Now, as part of this API, I'm going to be importing a spreadsheet. So I'm going to show you that file right now. Here's just a regular spreadsheet called Company Sales. You'll see that it's just a regular Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. Nothing really special about it. It has orders. It's got an order date, a region, a sales rep, the item that was sold, the units, the unit cost, and the total. So it's very straightforward. Rows and columns spreadsheet. I believe there's about 88,000 rows of data, but that's the spreadsheet we're going to use. So back to OpsGen now. I'm going to select the API that I just created, and now I'm in the API definition section here. And as you'll notice on the left-hand side, there are 5 tabs, and we're going to go through each one of those. But the first step is defining the data objects, and there's several ways. Like, data objects are at the heart of every API, and there's several ways within OpsGen that you can define those. And you can start by defining them by hand. So you can click the new button and you can just manually enter the data objects. For the purpose of this demonstration, we're going to use the spreadsheet, as I said. So I'm going to click on the import button. When I click on import, I can then go select my file. There's my spreadsheet file. Select that. So OpsGen is now importing that spreadsheet. It's interrogating it. It's trying to figure out what the structure of the spreadsheet is. And it's going to come up right away and show us that how it's interpreted the data in that spreadsheet. Keep in mind that this video is running in real time. There is no editing, no compression going on. And okay, here we go. So one of the things we're going to do here is we're going to tell the OpsGen that the first row is going to be a header column. So when I click that, you'll see now that we can see the first row of data from that spreadsheet. OpsGen has given it an object name, which I can change, but I'm going to keep everything as it is. Next, click the next button. You can see that all the columns it's got there, the data type it's determined to be in each column, and then it's got a little flag here of whether we want to include this column in our API. We're going to include all the columns. Click on that import button, and so now you'll see what's happened over here in this box. It's created an object for me called Company Sales based on that spreadsheet, and each of the fields of the object are what were the columns in the spreadsheet. Now there's a couple of things I'm going to change here. The unit cost, I'm going to make that, just to show you some of the other features of OpsGen here, I'm not going to leave that as an integer. I'm going to make that money. Same with the total. So I'm going to click on the total field here as well. Click the advanced button. And this shows you that you can have various data types in your data objects. Great. So now we've got all of our fields the way we want them. There's other properties, though, on the object that we're going to change here. One of the things we could do is we can provide an icon. And what that is all about is when I build this API, not only is it going to create the API, it's going to be a fully documented API. And if we were going to have many objects, or APIs can get quite complex, sometimes it's just helpful to have a visual cue or an icon associated with the object. We're not going to do that for this demonstration. because this is the only object in our API, we're going to include it. We are going to add security, and we're not going to make it read-only. We're going to leave it so that it could be read-write. So the assumption here is that once this spreadsheet data is now in the cloud, it's now become an active database. So I'm clicking the Save button there and moving on to my Settings tab. So in the Settings tab here, we have all different sorts of settings we can put on our API, the first of which is the API type. There are two types within OpsGen. There's Managed, in which case when I publish this API, not only is it going to create the API for me, it's also going to stand it up within Azure, meaning it's going to create the database, create the website, whatever infrastructure I need to support my API. The other option here is Downloadable. If I select Downloadable and I build my API, publish my API, it's going to create the API for me, but it's assuming then that I'm going to download that API and then open it up in Visual Studio or perhaps merge it in with some other code I have. Next, I'm going to set the plan. There are 3 plans that OpsGen provides right now. There's a freemium plan, which is the one I'm going to use for this demonstration. And then there's standard and there's premium. You can just check the OpsGen website for more details on the plans. Next is the location. We could choose the Azure location that we're going to stand this up in. I'm going to choose Central US. Next is the data strategy. We have 2 data strategies right now. I did select security on my object, and I'm going to have defined users only. The other option here would be anonymous, in which case any user could access the data. This could be in a situation where I've got data that I want to share with the world or let people innovate on. Next, we have the backup frequency. I'm going to use daily as my backup because I have dynamic data. I said it wasn't going to be read-only. It's going to be read-write. And I could choose if the data was more static, maybe I only want to back it up monthly. The final setting that we have in OpsGen right now is logging. Now this is for when I have my API up and running, and then I want to test whatever application that's going to call the API. Might be a mobile app, might be a web app, or any kind of application that's going to consume this API. When I first started building my app, I may want to use full logging so I can see all the calls that are being made to the API, the execution plans and all that kind of stuff. Might be helpful early on. As I go to production, perhaps I only want light logging, in which case I'll only see errors that might be occurring. So I'm going to save these settings. Moving on to the next tab, the Custom Operations tab. So we're not going to have any custom operations or custom methods in this API, but the purpose here is for me to be able to define methods that perhaps, they would be outside of the scope of normal CRUD data. So if I want to perhaps get data from various sources or even another API and massage that data or do arithmetic on it or whatever to return different values, I could do that here. That's going to be the subject of another video. I'm going to show you how you can do that. Next tab is security. So here I did say I want to have security, so I'm going to create 2 roles here for this API. I'm going to create an admin role. I'm going to create a user role. Then I'm going to create some users. I'm going to make David an admin. And I'm going to make Bob a user. Go into my roles. And I now have roles and users. I'm going to select that object. Now I'm going to leave admin with full CRUD capability, but on the user, I'm only going to give them the ability to read. Now, this could be where I'm setting up users that are actually the sales reps, perhaps, that are going to be able to just see the data. But as an admin user, I'm going to be able to update the data. I'm going to save that, move on to my final tab here. So what I've done to this point is I've started with a spreadsheet. I've created an object. I've imported a spreadsheet, which created an API, and I've imported a spreadsheet which has created this object with all these properties associated with it. I have made some settings of what I want OpsGen to do when I publish the API. I have not created any custom operations. I have set up some security, And now I'm going to go to the publish step. What I do is I click the build button, and what's happening now is OpsGen has started to build my API. And it's taking all the settings that I selected, all the data objects that I created, and it's passing them off to the OpsGen API engine and starting to build. And you'll see that there'll be more messages flashing up here as it does its thing. One of the things of note that I didn't mention is this is the first version for this API, of course, so it's building it as version 1. After my API is in production, and I could iterate through version 1 as often as I want, but after my API is in production, a better practice might be to create a new version when I make changes to it, and that way you can have mobile apps or web apps that are consuming version 1 while you're building version 2. So there's some version control there. So what OpsGen's done here is it's created the API, it's deployed it to Azure. It has now started the build of the web app. It's completed that actually, and now started to deploy that. And it's now finished. Actually, it's now completed that deployment to Azure. And if you look at the timeline there, that happened in roughly 2 minutes, let's say. So now let's go look at what OpsGen has done here with this. I'm going to click on the link. And you can see it by the URL bar at the top that it's going to an Azure website, which is OpsGen created. That website was not there 3 minutes ago. And it's brought up the OpsGen site now. We didn't have any custom operations in our API, but we're going to go look at the objects. See, we had the one object. And there's all the fields associated with that object. We're just going to go look at some of the sample code here from the documentation. We can just go through this. Let's just return all the fields just to select everything and see what it comes up. Now there is 88,000 rows, so this may take a second or two to come up. So there's all my data. Great. It's all, don't be afraid of that if you're not technical. This is all JSON formatted data, which I would use on my web app or on my mobile application to display perhaps a little better than that. Let's go do something a little bit more sophisticated with a filter. Now I know that there was a field there called region. We're going to use just starts with here as that. And we're going to say we just want everything in the East region, so it starts with E. After that, there we go. And so you'll see we've got all the data with the East region here. So that was just a couple of examples there. Really what we've got right now is a fully stood up API. We started with a spreadsheet. We've created a fully stood up API and in Microsoft Azure, and that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.